Our journey begins. It's day 42, July 12, 2024, and I'm currently out here taking my morning walk, and the stars are magnificent. There are so many stars, and they're all over the place. They're so bright. There's no moon to be found. The stars are just amazing. So I want to kind of do a mind map exploration based on yesterday's big breakthrough idea. So maybe I'll rehash the concept of that idea, and then we can dig into more of the details and sort of mind map some of the options for what to do. But yeah, I might get a little distracted because of the stars, but probably a good thing anyway. So the general idea was that I was trying to bring many different ideas together. I wanted to have the film be an exposition of why I came up with the ideas of the movement and what the actual goal behind those ideas are, and then explain what the initial sort of options are going to be. But I wanted a way to explore those, but not in like a how-to video or something, but more in a movie format. I also wanted it to be very interesting, and one of the ways I thought it could be interesting is by doing a sort of Narnia thing, where, because like in Narnia, you can imagine like what if there is actually a closet in my house that leads to another world? Like, wouldn't that be epic? And so that sort of idea where like there's something about the movie where you're like, well, what if that is actually happening? And so it really makes you think about your own life. Then another constraint was like the film has to be such that it's only really one character, and so that's me. And then it has to be such that it's in a sort of one place, like one setting, although there could potentially be some sort of background role, B-roll. Oh, I think that is lightning. So the sky is like flashing a little bit. And I guess that must be the lightning from somewhere far away. Too far away to see from here as far as the clouds go. Wow, yeah, it is definitely doing that though, unless it's my eyes. So, yeah, wanted it to be something where it was, it like could be something like Narnia, and it would be like one set, so like sort of one like room or some confined space type of thing. I also had this idea that this sort of idea of like suffering, of someone having to suffer through something, and sort of part of the tension is like having to get through this sort of suffering and like getting past the barriers. And so, because I know that can be very compelling, like as a child especially, I know that was powerful as a child to like think of other people suffering and to like, well, man, that like, what if I had to go through that sort of experience? um, like basically how to handle it and that sort of thing. Um, then another so yeah, that was an idea. Is that all of most of them, I think? Oh, I kind of wanted the framing, the plot of the film to be something where um it was it's not a complete reversal. So like I didn't want to have something where it's like me in the future talking to me now and explaining what me now needs to do. Like, although that would be potentially cool, that's not really the right framing because I wanted the framing to be like an explanation of like what's actually happening. And clearly, we don't really know how to get to the optimal future. And like, I want to express that point. But if I pretend or if I frame the movie like I already figured it out in the future and like, here, just follow that, no one's going to be convinced. Like, that's not going to, everyone's going to be like, well, yeah, but you just made that up. Like, you didn't actually get to that utopian future, that much better future. So I wanted that framing to be correct, which was definitely a little bit of a struggle. Now, another component, which I'm not sure that my current concept actually holds up to, is I don't necessarily want it to be creepy. Like, I don't mind if it's compellingly interesting, but especially, like, there's a good kind of creepy where, like, the movie's so good and real that you just have to appreciate whatever suffering the person's going through. But since I'm not a film director or anything like that, if I screw that up, it could just end up being like really creepy. And that's not really what I'm going for. So there's a little lightning bug that's like permanently on. So I'm still wondering how to do that. Okay, was there any other main constraints? Well, like, I wanted it to be very compelling. Yeah, very compelling, and like potentially IMAX theater quality, which, I mean, you could have that for anything, but if you have that for a really simple scene, that's way easier to achieve than if you try to do that for like a whole complicated set, because really that could cost a lot of money and everything. And then, yeah, I guess the big idea was that I wanted to sort of be like an actual movie, like an epic movie that like sort of could potentially kick off things for the movement. And because if you don't have something truly unique, truly fascinating, truly mind-bending, and it's not going to capture anyone's imagination. Sure, like maybe niche people would be interested, but I think it really has to capture people's imagination. And so that is the thing. Okay, so those were all the things. So then that eventually, after working with ChatGPT yesterday, I taking some inspiration from various ideas of other movies and whatnot, I was like, wait, wouldn't it be fascinating if the storyline kind of took place in one set, and I'm not exactly sure what this set is, but essentially I would be trapped. So as the main character, I would be trapped in this place, and I would go through some sort of suffering, and I would be suffering against basically negativity or something. Like, I would be trying to think of how to make the world better and stuff, but then every time I would do that, I would kind of become suffering. And then there would sort of be this, and so while I'm in that sort of trapped place, I would be talking to the person in the neighboring cell who was not, or like never ended up talking back, but it's clear from the movie that like I was talking to the person in the other cell. And so that's sort of how you get a lot of the narrative, is like me talking to the other person. And I'm not sure if you do like some sort of noises to represent the other person or something, but you'd want to keep making it think like the main character thinks that there's someone over in the other cell. So yeah, I'm thinking some sort of noises or something like that. But yeah, like the whole time he's just kind of like talking to that other person and explaining like, yeah, I guess the movie would kind of start out with like waking up to, like, I would sort of wake up to this trapped place, and I would be in this place of suffering, and I would have these good ideas, but then I would sort of get tortured for them. And then I kind of suspected that there was someone in the neighboring cell who I would talk to, but then if I shared good ideas, then I would get suffering, and that sort of thing. And there could be like there could be some sort of B-roll. Okay, now I can see that the lightning is from way far over there, and it is interesting because it does light up the whole sky just briefly. Well, maybe it just lights up the clouds. Yeah. And then I might even be missing some of the aspects. But like basically during that process of talking to the person in the other cell, I would be sharing the ideas of the movement, the ideas of like, but what if we just said that we cared about other people than ourselves? And then there would be someone, I'm not exactly sure on this part, but like somehow I would end up suffering for saying that. And sort of the tension would be that suffering, and you would just, like, as the audience, you just want, you want to figure out why the person is actually in this place and why he's suffering for that. And you just want the person to not give up. And so as the character, I would just continue saying like, I don't know, maybe I should just give up. And then the audience that would be watching it would be like, no, don't give up. And then they kind of wonder, but like maybe they do kind of wonder, like, well, maybe he should. Like if you're in that situation where there's no escaping. So like, yeah, you kind of get the idea as you're watching the film that there's no escape. Like maybe I even try to escape, but there's no way to escape. And you're just sort of stuck in this sort of nightmarish situation where you cannot escape, but you do have someone else to talk to, and you're kind of suffering. So then the climax would be so like as the person suffering, we continue to suffer more and more, and then sort of the time comes when he has to decide if he should just end his own existence or press on. And so he sort of comes to the choice, which, that was kind of another constraint, was to bring in elements of the choice, which is sort of in general the exposition of the movement. But essentially the choice comes where he wonders, should I just end it all, end all the suffering that I'm experiencing? Should I just let it go and give up, or should I stay with it? And so the audience is really wondering, like, should he just give up? Should he just end it for himself, or should he stay at it? Because and then you start to listen to what he's saying to the person in the other cell. Like what about the things he's saying is wrong? Why would someone make him suffer for thinking those things? Like who exactly is doing that? And perhaps it's the case also that when I'm trapped there, like I'm not exactly sure why I'm trapped there, or like who is trapping me there, but perhaps as I'm talking to the person in the other cell, I sort of talk about, well, maybe there's someone who wants to prevent anything good from happening in the world. And that's sort of the conclusion that I end up coming up with, is like there are people who will end up and then so I was playing with this idea, and perhaps also then it does eventually become apparent in the movie, and it sort of continues to lead the audience down the trail of this idea of there being some bad people who sort of take the version of a person that wants to make a good change and puts them in the cell and locks them up. But then you still exist somewhere else, but and so I could kind of see flashbacks of myself, of my alternate self, maybe in like a dream or something, or maybe the captors show me a video or something like that, where the other version of myself just starts doing selfish things and kind of giving up on any ideas. And as I realize that, I start calling out to that other version of myself. I'm like, no, do the right thing. Don't give up on the dreams to change the world. And then of course when that happens, then I get more suffering. But so yeah, like so then the audience is like, oh, like then they start wondering, like, whoa, like what if there is something like that, where good people, like the good part of themselves, the part that wants to make a difference, it gets trapped by some evil dictators that put them in a place where they cannot possibly escape. And that sort of brings ideas of those sort of ideas are really compelling, like sort of people that are in like really tough situations, and they eventually have to start a whole revolution and fight against the controlling government and eventually get out. Those sort of situations are really interesting. So I could see that being something that would be really interesting. So and yeah, I just can't believe how amazing this whole movie plot is. Like, who would have known that it was actually there the whole time? And I kind of felt like it was there. I just couldn't quite put words to it, but then I just kept exploring it, and here it is. Okay, so then the climax is, so he finds out that there's two versions of himself. The version that actually wants to make a difference is locked up, and that's him. And so the climax is, should he give up on him suffering and just let the other person have its way? Or should he stay at it? And even if he can introduce a little bit of change to the other person, because it appears that there is like some sort of effect where there is some sort of effect where like they are sort of mirror versions of themselves in real time. So like the bad things are like that the person that's not trapped does sort of reflect poorly on the person that's trapped, and then the person that's trapped can, even though he gets bashed and suffers for raising his voice to do the right thing, that still causes the other person to question. So he is able to make a little bit of an impact, even though the sort of vast amount of suffering prevents him from making much of an impact. So then it's just a matter of like the degree. So like if the person trapped realizes that the other person's going to do something really bad, then he'll step up and face the suffering. But if it's not too much, then I guess he wouldn't. So in the climax is to just give up. Like there is it sort of gets to a point where the suffering is too much to bear. The other person just like continues to make like the wrong mistakes, or like mistakes that sort of ruin the reputation of the individual. And so he sort of realizes that, and realizes he doesn't know if he can come back from that. And so the person trapped just feels like there's nothing he can do anymore. That he just starts feeling hopeless. And so I guess is that the climax? So he decides that he decides that he has a choice. The choice becomes very apparent, and he can either stay and continue to fight, or he can give up and just let whatever happens, and that sort of thing. And even though the situation looks sort of hopeless, and there's no way to know if he can make a difference, and so man, these beautiful summer mornings are just beautiful. Walking through like a tree-covered road, but then being able to see the stars through the trees. So I guess that's sort of the climax, and that is sort of combined with that's sort of what you think is the climax, right? Eventually he decides, okay, yes, I will stay at it. And it's sort of this overwhelmingly emotional thing for the audience and for him to make that decision to what he thinks is nearly hopeless, but he knows will be completely hopeless if he gives up. So he's going to keep at it, and it's sort of this emotional thing of like, man, that takes some character to keep going even when you're going to keep suffering. Just because you actually care about other people and because you actually want to do the right thing even when it's hard to do it. It's sort of like, and this is true about books. I was realizing this recently where in books and such, you really, like, something that you really get juiced up about, that you're really like, you get angry when you're reading a book is when the main character's values, or like say that the main character has this value to like do something and it sticks to those values, but then the main character has to suffer for that, and you just get angry and you're like, no, like, it's just doing what it thinks it's right, or the main character is just doing what they think is right. And so I think that could be a really compelling climax of like, you're just sitting there like, whoa, like, I can't believe he actually decided that. And then you start thinking about your own life, like, man, would I decide to do that? But then the real climax comes when I'm trying to think through how it's actually revealed. I guess because he made the choice to not give up, to go on no matter what, and to make a difference. Because he did that, he ends up being freed from that place. And he looks around and he's like, what happened? How could it be that me making a decision against what I was being suffered for actually ends up me being freed? And so then the audience is wondering, like what, was this a test? And he asks the person in the other thing, like, is this a test or something? And I'm trying to think of the perfect way to reveal this. But yeah, he's freed, but then there's still this big question. It's sort of this high tension moment of like, what's going on? Oh man, I'm trying to think of the perfect way to do this. So we might have to edit this, but so basically, first, because he cares about other people, he goes over to look at the other cell. And when he goes to look through the little door with the cell bars, the scene flashes, and it's me looking through the bars into the camera. And sort of a look of surprise. And the audience is like, wait, what's going on? Like, what does he see inside the bars? So there's still this high moment of tension. It's like, what does he see inside? And then perhaps it's just me saying, like, you just sort of see me in the close up, like through the bars. You just see me saying, "It was you?" And I'm not exactly sure how you would do this in a cinematic way. Wow, the stars are just beautiful. Wow. There are so many. But essentially, he's like, is that you? And but the scene, yeah. Again, I'm not exactly sure how you do this cinematically, but perhaps I'm able to get enough B-roll shots where I can flip the screen, and it's like images of all of everyone watching that exact movie. Like, I could just get a whole bunch of people who look like they're watching this movie. And so then the audience realizes, wait, I was the person in the other room. It was me the whole time. So it's one of those things where even though it's a movie, like the audience is actually a character in the movie. Like they are a participant. It's revealed at the end. If I'm able to keep the tension all the way through and people stay watching, I think that's where the setting comes in of like what the actual space is and how well I'm able to act that all out. And if there's such a good payoff that that like that's worth it, like that's still possible. But really you want the audience to enjoy the process of the movie. But yeah, it's sort of this awakening moment of like, wait a second, I was the person in the other room? So that, I guess that's somewhat climactic. But then the other sort of climax is realizing that he's able so yeah, he's freed, right? And so he tests saying the right thing and he doesn't get any suffering for it. And he's like, what's happening? And so he starts like walking out of wherever this captivity place was. And well, first of all, he thinks it's really strange that all the people in the other room was like literally the people watching this movie. But then and this could go in different orders. Like maybe he checks out the person in the other room afterward. And yeah, that might be true. You might want that to be secondary because that's like the critical moment for the viewer. So like first there's the climax for the person, and there's the climax for the main character, then for the viewer. Oh yeah, and throughout because something that makes movies really compelling is if you're really properly expressing someone's internal conflicts. And so this whole idea, that idea of internal conflict of should he continue to do what he thinks is right or should he let it go? But yeah, anyway, so he starts walking out of this place where he's been trapped and been suffering, and all of a sudden, like, he is not being hurt anymore. And I'm not exactly sure how you would reveal this, but somehow the climactic moment then is that it's revealed that so he's trying to look for like who would have kept him in this trapped place. Like he's trying to figure out like who let him go, who put him down here. And somehow or another there's a revealing moment, and I'm trying to think what it could be. How this would work. Because things begin to turn metaphorical. So the revealing moment sort of turns into a metaphor. Or like it's revealing of a metaphor. So how would you do that? Yeah, I'm trying to figure this out. I could tell you what the big reveal is, but I'd like to, I mean, you've probably figured it out already, but I'd like to kind of iron out what actually it would be. So let me think about that, and I'll be right back. And I would almost like it to feel similar to like the reveal of finding out who actually made the universe. And like there's no doubt then that you know who made the universe, because it's a clear reveal and everything sort of instantly makes sense. Okay, I've had the chance to think through this more. I think I got it kind of figured out. Starting to make sense. Yeah, I've been just looking at the beautiful stars in the sky. They are so cool. But so now I'm starting to wonder if the climax is actually slightly different. If it's the person, I don't know. I think if it's that the person being trapped is able to convince the person that's not trapped. Sort of that is the issue, because that would be more related to the actual thing. But yeah, like that potentially is what actually happens, is that instead of the climax being, well, maybe that is part of it, where he decides, okay, I am going to go on no matter what, which he does. But then he's still trapped. So that was just sort of like a semi-climax. So then the next climax is that he has to convince the other person outside or something. So like maybe, so he still expects that he will be locked there forever. But because he decided not to give up, he thought he would try other tactics to convince the other person out there. There's a beautiful shooting star. To convince the other person out there that he can sort of, that it's sort of his mirror, like to do the right thing. And so he lays out his best arguments, and there's sort of this climactic narrative where it's like the most compelling arguments for sort of the idea of making the choice to do the right thing. And so he does that. And so maybe I guess this is the grand climax, that it's the person on the outside who actually, their decision to listen to the trapped person is the moment when everything changes. So maybe maybe you don't realize it at first, but like, so yeah, the trapped person doesn't really know what decision was made. But he wakes up the next morning and his chains are off. And he's like, what is happening? And then he starts talking about doing the right thing and there's no more suffering. So then he looks in the other room, but he doesn't see anything. It just is a shot of me looking at the camera. So it's sort of a half reveal, but not a full reveal. And then the real deal is when sort of so now that he's free, he starts like walking out of that place where he was trapped, and while he's walking out, it's sort of this triumphant thing where like the whole audience is just like wondering like, who let him out? Like, how is this possible? And they're sort of elated that is actually happening, even though it seemed like it would never happen. And there's some sort of perfect cinematic way of doing this, but essentially he's looking, or like he opens the door to where he was trapped in, and he sees, and he's looking around, and all of a sudden he sees the other version of himself. And because of so at first, like, there's not necessarily a reveal, but he sees the other version of himself, and they start running to meet each other because, or like, no, like first there's this moment where they're looking at each other, and the person that was trapped isn't quite sure what decision the person that was not trapped made. But the person that was not trapped begins to smile, and the music changes, and maybe there's some sort of flashback to what actually happened where he did actually decide to do the right thing. He decided to take the advice of the person that was trapped, and to like do the right thing, and that maybe it's some sort of specific instance where he decided to listen to that other person. So he smiles, and the other person smiles, and they start running toward each other to sort of hug. And maybe they do end up hugging. I'm not exactly sure how to do that cinematically, but maybe they do it. But then the real revealing moment is something starts happening to the person that was trapped. They start to dissolve a little bit, and so then you're wondering, the viewer is wondering, oh my word, was it actually the case that was all a trick? And the person that was not trapped starts smiling a little bit, as if they know what's going on. But then you're kind of wondering if what's actually going on is not the right thing, or like, so like the viewer's kind of like, oh my word, was this all a trick? Was he not actually set free? Did he bring him out here to like kill him or something? But so then, yeah, like the person that was trapped starts dissolving, and you start feeling so sad. Like the viewer is just like, oh my word, why is he dissolving? And then And then somehow or another, you see that he's dissolving and fading into the person that was not trapped. And the person that was not trapped sort of like jitters and like convulses as they soak up that version. And then you start, like, it sort of clicks. And then you're, well, like, first you're wondering, like, oh my word, like, he, like, destroyed the other version. And then there's some sort of really interesting climax, some sort of reveal, some interesting way where you realize that they became the same person, and that the only person that had made the prison, well, so perhaps the person that had been holding him down there, so he sort of dissolves, he lets the dissolving happen, and then that person goes down to the prison and maybe like puts a bomb there or something and like blows up that specific prison. And as he looks through the hole to the other place, he sees, oh, so this is the really revealing moment. He looks through the cell and he sees, and then finally the camera switches to see what he sees. And it's a picture, and it's like 100 images of different people. It's like 100 different images of other people, maybe not watching the movie, but other people that are there that are struggling with the same thing. So, but somehow, maybe it's not explicit, but somehow the audience, the actual audience realizes that some of them are in their own prison cells. And so, anyway, so then the movie kind of ends as the full version of oneself, the version that's willing to do the right thing, that the other version had sort of had sort of put in a prison and had been shamed and was suffering. They let them go, and maybe you do kind of feel a little bit bad for the one that's not trapped, because maybe it was for some sort of terrible reason that he felt that way. Like maybe he had decent reasons for different things, and so you're still kind of wondering. And so that one climactic moment, you realize, or like when it's that final sort of dialogue, when he's convincing, they have this argument, and you really, like, it all sort of comes together where it's like, yes, but how can you know that you won't make a difference? Can you possibly know that? And yeah. So I'm starting to think just now, this is actually a decent movie idea. The main character doesn't necessarily have to be me. If this is really good and I could create a good script for it, maybe I take this to like Hollywood, and maybe not specifically Hollywood, but some sort of big budget thing, and get like a really good actor to do it. I don't know. I should be able to work hard enough to act this stuff out. It's just like, I wouldn't want my ego to get in the way of things happening. like the actual way that would work out best. But yeah, that's sort of the revealing moment where, so it's sort of a happy ending, or it's a mixed ending, because it's happy in the sense that, like, he's been set free, he's now one person, and he destroyed the prison. But then it's sad because it shows all the other people in all the other prisons. And you start to realize that what if you put yourself in that prison? So, I guess it is very explicit. It's like the literal movie is asking you, have you put yourself in that prison? Which I don't know if that's too explicit or if that's just right. But either way, it's just very compelling stuff. I mean, it just hits all the boxes. Okay, so that was a full explanation, wasn't it? But I had only written like a paragraph before, so like actually thinking through the details was important. But I'm now, if I have a little bit of time, I want to think through what actual place is the prison. Because if that's interesting, and this comes down to a lot of what will make it creepy or not. Like, for example, if it's like a grungy torture cell, like, that's going to be creepy, right? Like, what am I going to have to do to create that set in my room? And that's just going to be creepy. But what if the set was something else, something vastly mysterious and vastly unique? And what if the lighting was like unique and that sort of thing? But either way, I think it would sort of be a confined space, sort of chained to something, maybe able to pace around, maybe not, maybe just able to stay sitting there, maybe sort of like sitting against a wall or strapped to a table or something. But yeah, so then the other sort of component that this whole movie ends up doing, so it meets all the things. So he would have been able to have that exposition about the choice and sort of talk through the ideas of the movement, of like actually making a better world, of like just trying to do the right thing, even though like maybe it will turn out bad, like no one really knows. So like you can have that exposition, and I think it meets like every other qualification that I had thought of. And then in addition, it would also be very compelling for one of the primary reasons that people would not. So not only does it explain the ideas of the movement in a really interesting way, but it actually presents the choice to the audience in a really interesting way. Because it causes them to think about themselves, and the audience. There must be a deer in the woods. I can hear it walking. Only slightly scary. Oh man, that is scary. Anyway, I guess you could do something like that. Like it could be scary, where you're in like a dark forest or something like that. Who knows? And you hear these sounds, and it's just sort of scary. But I don't know if that's really what I want to go for, because I'd like it to be watchable and for like young kids too, because it's really the young kids that you want to challenge this question with, of, are you just going to believe what someone tells you, or are you going to and put your dreams in a box and close them and put them in a cell, or are you going to continue to fight for your dreams and let your dreams pull you toward what you actually want to do. But yeah, that is such a major component of all of this, is that it would present the actual choice to everyone that watches the movie in a really interesting way. So then it would be like, and so I don't know if it would be after the movie, but it would be like, it would sort of transition into like the real life. So I would start talking, and that is one reason that it would be good if I was the main character, because then like the audience would already have a rapport with who I am and the struggle and all of that, and then it would be like me talking about something, and I would be like, are you trapping yourself? Are you? And the other thing about this whole movie plot is that it's very psychological and very interesting, because it causes you to reflect on like who you actually are. Of course, this whole metaphor could be like, you could say this metaphor is similar to like, let's say you had gender dysphoria, and that was like, you could assimilate that to the same thing, where like you were locking up that part of yourself or something. But I think it's slightly different. Although, I mean, yeah, you can make similar analogies to lots of different things. Then, so then maybe at the end, I would sort of explain, like, let yourself go. Or maybe I wouldn't be that explicit with it. It's not like I have to double it up. It's not like I have to be like, okay. But instead, I would just be like, something like, if you decide to let that version of yourself go, and you'd like to join together to start the movement that he was talking about, because somehow I do explain the ideas of the movement of people coming together to make a difference. Somehow that does actually come about in the movie. Maybe in my conversations with the person in the other cell, which is perfect, because that's actually like the metaphor, which is me talking to the world through this movie, explaining to them the ideas. And so there's sort of the call to action at the end, which is if you do want to join the movement, here's how to join the movement. If you're interested in becoming one of the original founders of the actual like people, then you can submit your application. But if you just want to like join together to make a difference, like for coordination purposes and just working together and meeting like-minded people, or at least if you're at least interested in becoming the best version of yourself, like here's how to get connected, basically, which would be like some sort of email or creating an account somewhere or something. But yeah, anyway, this whole idea is just so perfect. I knew it was there. And it is pretty epic, although it's going to be somewhat hard to figure out. A big component of it is the visual aspect of where exactly I'm trapped and how well I can represent the other person going about their normal jobs, or like going about their normal life. But I don't know. I think it could be life-changing. I don't know of I mean, I'm definitely sure that there are movies with similar metaphorical things going on. Like, I know that there's that one movie with Leonardo DiCaprio who's like, he's sort of, the whole movie is how he thinks that he's on this island. He is a detective and he gets trapped or whatever. But like in all reality, he was actually confusing himself. And that was sort of the metaphor at the end. Like, no, he was actually not mentally stable. And there are other movies like that for sure. That have that really interesting. And those are often like the most interesting movies there are. Like sort of like Interstellar, where like at the end you wonder like, what if there is something like that? Or yeah, anyway. So that metaphorical thing is to like that one can relate to their own life is like super interesting. So yeah, I'm really excited. I'm just overwhelmed. I just don't want it to be cringy. And I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I'm just gonna have to write the script out. Now that I have this mind map, I'm just gonna write like the actual script out, which will probably take a while. But write that all out, get that all down perfectly, and then I can kind of think about if I want to do it myself, or if I want to somehow arrange for it to be done by professional Hollywood people. Although, like, nowadays, you can do it yourselves. And so if I could find a couple of people who were interested in doing the various parts, because I do have a lot of the main equipment, and then someone who could train me to be an actor, or me just spend a while learning that aspect, then maybe it would work out. So, all right. Thank you so much.